Welcome back to the second episode of Life After Aryan. I'm your host, Madelayne Klein. In this episode, we're rejoined by our guest from episode 1, a man from Alabama who was part of the white supremacy movement in the late 80s and early 90s and spent 2 decades in state prison. Today, we'll dive deeper into topics we touched on last time, exploring his experiences in prison, the challenges he faced upon release, and the profound impact of 2 decades behind bars. We'll also discuss the death penalty and even touch on the topic of conjugal visits. If you haven't listened to episode 1 yet, I highly recommend doing so for a better understanding of our conversation today. Let's get into it. I was thinking about just like the life after prison aspect of things. So you didn't get paroled. So did you have like a countdown to your release date, or did someone just come in and be like, oh yeah, you're going home tomorrow? How did that work?
So I had a 20-year sentence, so I knew the day I would get out regardless. But they had a program back then called supervised release. And originally it was designed, and it was a great idea. It was designed for people that had endured long-term incarceration, but had a year or less left to serve on their sentence. The idea was to, if you had like a home plan and a job plan, there's all kind of rules and stipulations. You have to go there. You have a curfew. You have basically a parole officer that keeps up with you and checks up on you, make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. You got to show them pay stubs every week, submit to drug screening. I think the curfew was like 9 o'clock at night, but they changed the criteria for the program to where you were only eligible within 90 days. And I wasn't ever eligible for anything, so I thought it was a joke. But Alabama was so slow with everything. So the day that I was eligible for it, I put in for it. And it took them forever to go through the steps of the process to do it. And they came, and I was going to stay with my brother, and they interviewed him, went to his house and approved me. And I was down to 5 weeks left to finish my sentence. And they let me out. And my mother didn't know that I was getting out, but my brothers came and picked me up. So I'll go ahead and make you cry. I'll send you that video on Messenger.
Oh my God, can you?
Yeah. So it's crazy. My brother lives in Dallas, and he's got a real estate company. And he called my mom, and he said, hey, I'm in town playing golf. I'd love to stop by and see you. And she was like, well, I haven't done my hair and da da da. And he was like, it's okay. I'm just going to stop by for a minute. It was me, my brother, both my younger brothers, my sister-in-law, and I think my nieces. Yeah, my nieces were there. And we all pulled up in their little minivan, and I hid behind the van. And my stepfather and mom come outside, and they had told my mom to cover her eyes. So I can't remember. I think it was my brother or my stepfather. I have to look back at the video. Was covering her eyes, and she kept saying, I'm scared. I'm nervous. I don't know what's going on. And I walked up, and they uncovered her eyes. And she is bawling. She started bawling. And she was like, because I looked so much like my baby brother. She was like, I kept looking at your face, and it was your face. But yeah, it was a great day.
What did you do? What did you do first, other than go see your mom?
We went and had lunch. And then my brother had got an Airbnb in a really cool little lake house. I would go there during the day, and we'd hang out and fish and paddleboard and stuff like that. And like I said, I had a 9 o'clock curfew, so I'd go back every night, and I was staying at my brother's. And the day I got out, I called my daughter, and she didn't understand when I called from my cell phone. I said, hey, baby. She said, what are you doing? Because she's so used to hearing, this is a prepaid call from the Alabama Department of Corrections. She's so used to, she'd never heard me call on a cell phone. I was like, I was just calling you. What are you doing? She was like, are you out? And I said, yeah. So she started crying, and I was like, babe, I said, I'm going to see you soon. I don't know when. Just calm down. And she was bawling. It was a great day. It was like I was kind of mentally exhausted. And it was about 10 o'clock that night. I heard a knock on the door I was sleeping in the room I was in. And I opened it. It was my daughter. She drove like 5 hours to come be with me. And it was ridiculous. I was like, you sleep in this bed right here. And I went and slept how I slept in the dining room floor. But we hung out. It was awesome. It was amazing. She stayed for a few days.
I can't even imagine the feeling you had.
That shocked me. Yeah, that was huge. And then the pressure hit me. I was like, oh shit, I don't have any money. I don't know what to do. But my brother, his business was doing pretty good, and he bought me some clothes and gave me a little bit of spending cash. And I mean, I knew I kind of had like maybe a week or so to just enjoy the time before I really had to, get my head out of my butt and get to work. So I went and I took a pipe welding test and I passed the test and they hired me in immediately. And I started going to work and it was funny. The first time the probation officer came and he called me, he's like, I'm outside. He wasn't going to come in and disturb the house. He's like, I'm outside. Just bring your pay stub. I want to verify your employment. I was like, all right. So I bring my pay stub out there and he looks at it and he looked at me and he shook his head and he said, you've been out of prison 2 weeks and you make more money than I do. And I started laughing. I said, well, I'm sorry I learned how to weld, dude. I don't know what to tell you. That was a good feeling, though. He actually let me off. I had an apartment with a girl and they wouldn't let me live there. I had to be immediate family I stayed with. I had like less than 2 weeks left and he showed up and he was like, man, you've done great. He said, you're cleared to drive. You're good to drive. And he said, you go ahead and pack all your stuff and move into your apartment. I'm going to go ahead and release you. You're going to do fine. So that was cool. I got to move into my apartment and that was super, super dope.
What was it like driving for the first time? I was thinking about that the other day while I was driving. I was like, I wonder if it's like riding a bike. Like, you haven't driven in so long.
It's a little nerve-wracking because if you think about it, you don't see a lot of fast objects moving around you like in prison. Something's moving fast, something's bad is going on. So especially big objects. So you just driving down the highway is you're not used to seeing the volume of traffic and moving and generally driving pretty slow. And it takes a second. I mean, I got my driver's license, I think the first week I was out. I was kind of determined. I knew I had a clock ticking.
Do you have to retake the test?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it'd been so long. Yeah, I think if you haven't taken it, you can renew it every 4 years, but if you don't, you have to retake the whole test. And I couldn't renew it. Yep, there was that. What was a huge thing to me is, I mean, I was young when I got incarcerated and I didn't know anything about credit or banking or anything. And I went to my banker and I sat down and said, look, here's the deal. I just did a very long time in prison and I don't know how to do any of this stuff and I need to build my credit. Like I want to start now. And she gave me a plan and it was basically get a $300 prepaid credit card and I give them $300. They hold on to it and I just show them over 6 months that I'm going to pay my bill. And my brother's pretty smart. He was like, spend 30% of it and pay it off early every month. And man, my credit just started blowing up and they increased my credit limit and gave me my money back. And then my first vehicle that I got financed on my own, the interest rate was like 18%. And it was a horrible piece of crap. Yeah, I got out of it, luckily. It caught on fire and I ended up getting money from Ford for it. So I paid it off and then put a motor in it and sold it. So I actually made some money off that. But I don't know, the credit thing, I still like mentor some people that are getting out on the credit thing because they don't realize how important it is in this day and age. I mean, you can't get a cell phone really hardly without it. Man, I'm proud of one of the guys that I mentored, Jerry. He was a welder, a pipe welder. And in school, they kind of teach you the better welder you are, the less responsibility you have and the less stuff you have to do. But it's such a disservice. Like nobody likes a guy that just sits around and waits on something to weld, and when you're done welding you're sitting around. That's kind of entitled. So I told him, I said, look, you need to pour yourself into blueprints. When you hit a job site, yeah, you're a welder, but tag along with your fitter. Learn everything you can about fitting. Learn how to run copper. Learn how the systems actually operate, and you'll be invaluable. And he did, and he's the lead foreman. He's married, got a kid. He's the lead foreman for a $60 million a year company and about to be a superintendent. So I'm so proud of that guy. Like he's just crushing it. Yeah, and he's still on parole. So I don't know how he made parole because they just don't do that anymore. But he's been out, I don't know, probably about 6 years. He's doing great. Yeah, a friend of mine that was not doing so great. I knew he wasn't. I was close to him. He was athletic, worked out all the time. And I knew his mom had a lot of money. And she ended up passing away. And I just saw a rapid decline in everything that he was doing. And I knew he was doing drugs and everything else. And I went to his house and it's huge. It was humongous, but it was really trashy and had garbage everywhere. And he tried to give me something. I don't know what it was. It was some kind of methy looking thing. I don't know. I was like, dude, I didn't do that in there. What makes you think I'm going to do that out here? And I just kind of pulled away. His mom passed away. And I told a friend of mine, I said, Jason will be dead inside of a year. There's no way. His health was declining. I saw his teeth getting all messed up. And sure as I said, it, like 2 months after I said that, he ended up drowning at one of our big parks around here, like in July. Yeah, he drowned. And they say that he cramped, and I'm pretty sure he probably remembers himself as healthy as he was and not thinking he's, not in the shape he was. And they say he got out in the middle of the lake and they think he cramped and went under and never came back up. Yeah, it's crazy. There's been a few people recently die that I was there with that it just doesn't surprise me. I mean, you have every opportunity in the world to screw something up. You got to really do good out here. But when you got that felony on your record.
I've always been so glad that I didn't come into a large sum of money when I was young.
Oh my God, me too.
That would not have been good.
Right now, it would be perfect timing.
Yes. Now I would be totally responsible. Well, I'd be like 90% responsible.
I would be so mostly responsible. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's recipe for disaster for sure.
Yeah. A couple of other things that just stand out to me that I didn't really prepare myself. I don't usually have a lot of anxiety, but when it comes to like computers and technology, obviously, I mean, I'd never even used a real phone. I'd used like a flip phone before, but you couldn't even text when I was using a phone. Just going to Walmart and doing self-checkout. Like I didn't know how to do any of that. The girl I was dating at the time, she would try to teach me, but it's a lot of information taken at once. But getting gas, all that.
I couldn't imagine because like 20 years is a long time, but the 20 years specifically that you spent away, technology, boom.
It's not like it was from the 50s to the 70s.
Exactly.
It was like, yeah, there's a lot of technological advances, and it blew me away.
Like the first time you saw a push to start car, were you like, what is happening?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I bought a truck, I bought a Dodge, and instead of it having a shifter to put in a gear, it had a little knob. And I was like, this is ridiculous. What the hell is that all about?
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of anxiety, going back to your first night of freedom, which you said you slept on the dining room floor, but I was going to ask, did you have like the best sleep ever?
Yeah. I slept for 9 hours straight. I slept for 9 hours straight. I can't remember if I told you, there's so many loud noises all of the time. You never really get solid sleep. I mean, it's intercoms all night. It's people banging on stuff all night. There's some people rapping and banging on their doors all night. There's people walking around you all the time, and you never get quality sleep. If you're lucky enough to be at a facility that has cells, you'll have a closed door and it helps a little. And then you're not supposed to have them, but I always ended up with some earplugs that would help. It's funny. So they wouldn't let you have dental floss in prison, but they would give you straight razors to shave with. So figure that one out. So I cut people's hair, cut officers' hair, and they're not supposed to really pay you, but they want a decent haircut. So they do. And they don't pay you in cash because you can't have cash. So they pay you in it might be coffee or some kind of goods, whatever. It was funny. I used to cut this sergeant's hair, and he's like, all right, what do you want? I'd be like, man, give me a roll of dental floss. And he was like, of all the things, all the contraband you're trying to get into the prison, you want some dental floss? I said, yeah. I promise I'm not going to escape with it. I just want some freaking dental floss. It's so stupid. They say you can strangle somebody. Well, you got bootlaces and you got belts and you've got so many things in prison that dental floss comes from.
If you're going to strangle someone, dental floss isn't your first go-to.
That is definitely not my first go-to. I mean, sheets, torn up sheets. That's silly.
I realize where there's a will, there's a way.
Sure.
But dental floss?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a damn shame. You could get weed, you could get morphine, you could get homemade alcohol.
How do you smoke weed in prison? You can smell it.
They'll walk outside and roll a little bitty tiny joint and burn it really fast and get back in. And I mean, it's not like they don't drug screen. So that's a whole nother funny situation too. You'll see guys that they've been smoking. They'll wake you up like 2 a.m. for a drug screen. And there'll be guys chugging water, peeing their pants, standing in line, trying to flush their system before they go in there and pee. There's no way to hide it. When you go in, there's like a guy sitting next to a toilet. One room, you get completely nude, no socks, nothing. And then you go into the next room, and the guy's face is like at the cup, staring at you. I made one of them mad one time. I was like, man, you ever go home and tell your wife you landed your dream job? You get to stare at junk all day? It's just not a fan.
Tough crowd.
Yeah, no kidding. Is this thing on?
I was thinking just in the last couple of weeks, I was thinking a lot about all of the firsts after you left. Like, what did you eat? Was the first coffee like magical? I imagine prison coffee is kind of shitty.
You can buy bags of Taster's Choice coffee, and what's funny is we had a Keurig and all kind of fancy coffee machines, and I drank Taster's Choice coffee for probably 2 years until finally my girlfriend was like, "Look, there's some things you just need to move on from.
You don't have to do this."
I was like, it's easy. I just 2 spoons and some hot water and I go. I don't care. I drink black coffee anyway. Well, now I'm a little more fancy. I do have a Keurig, so I've advanced to the normal people of society again when it comes to coffee. But food, it was weird because I was morbidly obese when I went to prison. And I really started reading about nutrition and just changing everything I did nutritionally and moving more and learning how to lose fat and gain muscle. And there's not a lot of things that taste that good in prison. They serve cakes and they serve, you can buy pastries, and they'd have rice and noodles and white bread rolls and all the stuff that's horrible for you. So even, man, this is rough. They used to have like these meat patties, and sometimes they're beef, sometimes they're chicken, sometimes they were turkey, but nobody ate the liver ones. They were so bad. And I would trade off all of my stuff for meat patties. Like I would trade off all my desserts, my rolls, my rices, all that stuff. And I ate meat patties and, a little bit of like vegetables and stuff. And that was it. In my opinion, humans along the way have started equating food with pleasure. I kind of don't do that. It's fuel to me. Same things taste good to me. And I do, like, if I could eat steak 20 times a day, I probably would. But food is good. And sometimes it's better than others. But I don't do the thing where people are just like, man, I just have to have this good meal. It tastes so good. And because that's dangerous thinking to me. I mean, I don't want to be obese again. And I remember romanticizing food. Oh, I got to have this. It tastes so good. And I can't even eat sugar anymore at all. Like it gives me a headache and I feel like crap the next day.
Sugar is so bad for you.
It's horrible. It's inflammatory. It's cancer causing.
So the day that you were released, did you just like get up and they were like, okay, bye? Like what was the protocol?
So I found out the Friday before that I was getting out on Monday. So my brother flew in from Texas. My other brother took off work. They drove up to the prison. It was about 2 hours away from where we were staying, 2.5 hours. And when you transfer or when you EOS or when you're getting out, they lock the prison down at night. And then at 6 o'clock in the morning, they have a head count. Well, they move everybody before the head count. That way, when they do the head count, everybody is where they need to be. They don't have a bunch of moving around after the count, because they don't know if it's going to clear or not. So here comes count time. I'm like, all right, woohoo, ready to go up front because they're going to take me up front because I'm getting released. And they didn't. I just sat there. They didn't call my name. And I was like, I fucking knew it. I'm not getting out. I knew it. So I'm sitting there through the whole count, and it took them like an hour and a half to clear the count. They had to recount, and I was like, this is terrible. Finally, the count cleared, and they said, bag and bag. So I told everybody, bye, here's all my stuff. I'm out. And I got to the front, and then I had to set up in the cell for about an hour and a half up there. And
you're right. Nothing moves fast over there.
No. My brothers brought me clothes. I'd put on my first pair of denim jeans and forever and like a Vans t-shirt. And they brought me some Vans. And it was so weird to me looking at all these colors because I hadn't seen colors in so long. That's the big thing. Once you get out of the fences, it's so strange because you see like tree lines and stuff, but you look through a fence for so long, you forget what it kind of looks like. And then you step out and you see everything so vivid and you're just like, it's almost sensory overload. And you walk in a house and there's so many different colors. You used to see in grays and solids and you don't see any bright colors, and all of the uniforms were white. That was it. So you wore white forever. The t-shirts, underwear, everything was white. Shoes had to be white. So yeah, anything with color was like, I was like, I will never wear anything white ever again.
Were you ever like transferred or anything? Or did you stay in that building for 20 years?
No, I got transferred a couple of times. I ended up being able to stay at one place for a long time because of some of the jobs that I had. But most of the time you get moved around. I think they do transfers a little more frequently now because they don't want you to get too comfortable. And when you get too comfortable and you start developing relationships with guards and nurses and stuff like that, and they don't, it's kind of like a security thing. But I was lucky and I got to stay in one of the better places. Now I've heard it's horrible. There used to be like 2 or 3 stabbings a year. Now, from what I've heard, there's like 2 or 3 a week. It's pretty bad. Yeah, it's really, really bad. A good friend of mine, Jimbo, he was at a work release, which because of his security level, he can't go out and work by himself at a job, but he can work at a place that's kind of supervised, and they don't really make that much money. But it's a less restrictive place, and, if you can get there, it's great. But he had a disagreement with a guy in the chow hall, and 4 guys surrounded him. And he did what he had to do, and he knocked one of them out, and he ended up going back to Limestone. And he said it had changed so much that he was like, it's not a possibility of if some bad things are going to happen to you. It's just a win the way it is now. So here's how the pods are set up there, the buildings. It's somewhat like a horseshoe, but more angular. So in the center of that horseshoe, you have a cubicle that can see through both sides of the dorms through plexiglass. And There's one guard in that. But when they count, you have like 3 or 4 guards come in and count, and then they leave. You just have that one officer in the cubicle. So there's not like, if you get in some shit, like there's nothing that's going to save you. There's nobody coming to save you. So what they'll do is lock the dorm down, then they call for a bunch of officers to come run over there after the fact. But a buddy of mine was in St. Clair not long ago, and he said there was like 6 guys attacked a guy with knives and were just stabbing him to death, and the guards stood there and watched because they couldn't do anything. They don't have guns or anything. So they just had to stand there until they were done. It's bad. Like they said at Limestone, Jimbo said there's people on like Spice and Flocka and all these crazy drugs. I don't know, have any idea what they are. But he said there's people just walking around with butcher knives and hatchets. And he said there was one guy that stood up on a little bench, and there was a female guard in the cubicle, and he was knocking on the window with his hatchet, telling her he was going to get her. It's like Wild Wild West in there now. I don't know how anybody survives it. It's horrible.
This confuses me because I can understand someone serving life without. They have nothing to lose. So whatever, act up, do whatever you want. But isn't the main goal is to get out of prison? Why would you do anything to extend your sentence?
Because people get there and they get caught up in gangs and they get on drugs, and drugs is the worst thing in there. The people selling them, the people buying them, the people doing them, the people sneaking them in, trying to hide them so somebody doesn't steal your stash, trying to keep snitches from finding out. It's just a whole thing, and they get so caught up in it. And then there's like, if you're involved in that culture, there's a few things that if you stay away from in prison, for the most part, you can keep a lot of trouble at bay. And that's drugs, gambling, which is huge. You have tickets, you have bookies in there, you have everything. Alcohol, homosexuality for sure. That'll get you killed big time. And honestly, I've seen more fights over the television than anything. It's insane. Like I got to where I didn't even watch. If something happened to be on that I wanted to watch, I might stop and watch it. But for the most part, I was reading or doing something else. It's just not worth it. There was a guy that got stabbed in his heart over soap operas one day. Went up and changed the TV. And dude said, all right, and went and got a freaking foot-long knife and stabbed him while he's sitting there watching TV.
I imagine the homosexuality aspect of things, it's not because these men are actually gay. I imagine it's like a transactional thing for gambling, drugs, alcohol, whatever.
Some of them, yeah, some of them are. Some come from the outside like that, and I have respect for that. The ones that come there and do it because they're either scared or cowardly, or they do it to make money. Like I didn't have a lot of respect for that. Like I remember I played on a softball team with this white guy that was gay, and he's a good-looking guy, muscular, in good shape, and he'd joke about it. I mean, he thought it was funny. He's like, man, he said, I was gay on the street. And he said, when I came to prison, he said, I learned real quick, if you're going to be gay and you're going to be picky, you better know how to fight. Busted out laughing. I was like, yeah, I can see that. He's an attractive guy. I said, I can see that happening. If you think a male-female relationship out here can get dramatic, I mean, I guess to a lot of people in there, they're kind of considered like their only type of sexual contact, and they get so fixated on it that it's like that's all they have, and they get super clingy about it. And like if one of them cheats on the other one, man, there's some horrible things that have happened behind that. Like, I mean, I've seen this one muscular guy had a little smaller, like feminine guy, and the muscular guy cheated on the feminine guy, and he caught him, and they got into a fight. He beat the little feminine guy up, and they had him in the little lobby waiting for the guards to come in, and the little feminine guy walked up and said, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again, and went to hug the guy. And as soon as they hugged, he bit his freaking nose off and spit it in the air.
You could have given me a million guesses, and that is not where I thought that was going.
Yeah, he bit his nose off.
Holy shit. Yeah, I would have never thought about like relationships. I thought it would all just be purely transactional and like physical.
No, there's well, I mean, there's relationships, there's pimps. There's pimps that have boys that they'll pimp them out and they'll protect them, but they're gonna make money off of them. The fashion shows are humorous. They'll use Kool-Aid and stuff for lipstick and put makeup on and make their own handmade panties and stuff and do like runway walking for people throwing bags of coffee and stuff. It's humorous.
What?
Oh yeah, they do that shit too. It's humorous. It's the whole thing. It is the whole thing.
I have to say, prison drag shows were not on my bingo card for this episode, but I'm glad we're talking about it. It's incredible to hear how creativity and expression can thrive even in such restrictive environments. It really highlights the resilience of the human spirit. Speaking of not like sexual, but just physical touch, did you like, so when you got out and hugged your brothers or your daughter, was that the first time you were able to touch or hug your family?
No, in most places in Alabama, jail is not the case, but in prison you have, well, they did away from about 3 years when COVID happened, but you can have like one hug and one kiss and then you sit down. That's it. So that was another thing that was, and to this day, I really have to work at, because I've been in a couple of relationships where the girl is like, you never touch me. And it's because for 20 years, like, you couldn't do that. And it's like, I got kind of trained, and now I have to like forcibly remember, okay, I can, like, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. It's a hard behavior to unlearn, because you can't, think about it. You can't touch nurses. You can't touch any females. Even if you're married or got a girlfriend, she comes, sees you on the visitation, you get one hug and one kiss. And, sometimes they'll bitch about you holding hands. So it messes a lot of people up. For real. It makes a female think that you're cold and don't care, because women like to be reassured a lot. The ones that I've been around have, anyway.
It all depends on what your love language is.
Well, every single one I've ever picked.
It's physical touch.
Needs that. Yes, every single one. There used to be some prisons in the United States that had conjugal visits. And like, if you were married, it's genius. It's the best disciplinary tool that you could ever have in prison. Can you imagine if every 90 days you got a conjugal visit, but if you acted out, you didn't get it? What a great motivator. Like, nobody would ever get in trouble in prison.
Drug-free, violence-free.
Yeah. Yeah, you're getting a conjugal visit every 90 days. Whew, I ain't doing nothing but the right thing, Jack.
Yeah, but on the Bible Belt, you'd like have to be married.
Yeah, and I think most of them are like that. So what would happen is, so if you're in a court proceeding, there's a way that they were getting away with it. I forget what state, and it was California. And let's just say, I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, but say you're at sentencing, but your girl is at your sentencing. There was a way that you could basically, because it's witnessed by a judge, you could profess that you're both married, and it's like a legally binding thing. So people were doing that so they could get married right before they went to prison. So they were like, I see you in 90 days, girl.
Hey, whatever. Whatever works for you.
No kidding. I'd have done it. No doubt. If I had that option.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
Who wouldn't?
I lost my mind when I get out. I broke up with my girlfriend. That was a whole thing. And I got on every dating app there is. And I was like, I don't know what the hell all that was about.
Well, you said you were like, it was like being 20.
It was. Yeah, mentally, it was. Right now, I think I'm about at 22 now, 23.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. It's baby steps. I don't want to do it too fast. It's very hard to not be selfish when you get out of prison. All your friends and family are just wanting time with you. And what you want to do is just go, 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 and see, and do. And you end up being, before you know it, it's a couple of years, and you're like, damn, I've been really selfish with my time.
Well, you're still in survival mode.
I agree with that. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to take care of anything else. So I agree with that to a point.
Well, on that note, I've asked you this before, but just not while we were recording. Do you feel like you've lived 1,000 lives in the last 8 years, or that you were ever making up for lost time?
I don't think you can ever make up for lost time, but I think that if anybody ever tried to do it, I did. I got to see a lot of things that I wanted to see. And I still have a lot of things on my bucket list. I experienced a lot of things I never experienced. Positive, some probably not so positive. But when I'm mentoring somebody, when they first get out, I say, the first thing you do is do not get in a long-term relationship with anybody. I said, dude, I tell them, you don't know yourself. You got at least a year of getting your head out of your ass and getting something going, man. One of my best friends, he's been out about a year. It's about a year and a half now. And I told him, like, he's one of the smartest people I've ever met. We would do CrossFit in prison. And he had more cardio than me, and I had more strength than him. And we pushed each other really well. And he studied religion, and he's an amazing artist. Unreal artist. And he got out, and he was like a little bit arrogant to how hard this is to transition. And one of the strongest men I ever met in my life was talking about he might need to be medicated, because like he's battling depression and don't know what to do, and he's struggling and lonely and doesn't fit in. And I just told him, I said, Adrian, you're going to make it, dude. Just probably stay out of the bottle a little bit more and stay more busy. Because sitting around, it's crazy how you're not really coached on how to do this right when you get out. And there's a lot of learning curves. And if you don't stay diligent, man, you can find yourself in a really bad place. And I've been there a few times myself. And honestly, a couple of years ago, a breakup had me like I didn't want to break up, and neither did she, but we had to for medical reasons. And it about broke me. I ain't gonna lie. That was hard, really hard.
It can be so dark.
Yeah.
Like, and you feel like it's never going to end. Like, that's how you're going to feel forever.
She got really sick, and she couldn't eat, she couldn't drink water, she couldn't do anything. So I got her to the hospital, and she was there for about 3 months. I was there every day, 8, 10 hours a day. She almost died 3 times. She lost her large intestine, multiple surgeries. She was a kickboxer, and she went in, she was in amazing shape. And then when she couldn't even, I had to teach her how to walk again. Yeah, it was, she lost so much muscle, she couldn't move, she couldn't even stand up and sit down by herself. And I told her mom, like, she was from Iowa, and I told her mom and I had talked, and I said, look, if she doesn't start responding to medication, she needs to come home. Like, because I'm just by myself here, and she needs to be with her family. She's got a daughter and mother and all of her friends and family up there. So I made the call, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done because it definitely broke her heart. I still don't know if she realizes it was from a good place, you know? Yeah, it was rough. One thing a friend of mine told me, he's one of my very few friends. I don't have very many, maybe 2 or 3 people I call actual friends. We went out to dinner, and he knew I was just busted up. And he said, most of the time, the right decision isn't always the easy decision. And I was like, shit, that's accurate. Yeah. He said, you're doing the right thing.
Our guest and I started talking about family, mostly about babies. My daughter and his granddaughter are only 3 months apart, and he mentioned that his daughter has a husband. I got married 4 years ago, and having my dad there meant everything to me, so I couldn't resist asking about her wedding. Honestly, his answer broke my heart. It really highlights the emotional weight of his journey and how it shaped and impacted those precious moments that should be filled with joy. Is your daughter married in the last few years? Were you at her wedding?
Yeah. That was a rough one too. I had to sneak off and cry on that one. And I couldn't let anybody see it because so her stepfather came into her life when she was a year and a half, and he's raised her ever since.
Decent guy? Yeah.
He's a great guy.
Good.
Great guy. If not for him, like, she would have not had as good a chance as she had. Her mom struggled with a few things, but great guy. And I go to the wedding, and I'm assuming that, we're probably both going to walk her down the aisle, maybe. And I didn't get invited to do it, and I just sat there and watched him do it. And then once they did the things, I kind of dipped off and cried a little bit and came back. And my little niece put me on blast. Hey, Uncle, so you go hop on that tree over there and cry. I was like, I had something in my eye. Kid, shut up. Leave me alone.
Your face pushes her out of the way.
Yeah, get out of here, kid. I got back to my hotel room. I got it out of my system. It took me, it was hurt me, but it took about a week. And I was like, you know what? I understand. That was the right call. He did the father-daughter dance with her. And I was just stood there and kind of took it. And I was like, it's hurtful because I wanted it to be that, but it's not that. So I have to accept the reality of it. And it took me a second to do that.
Your feelings are definitely valid, but it is nice that she had him and is that close with him.
Sure. She calls him dad. And forever, I would be like, who? She'd say, Dad, and I'll be like, who? That was definitely the hardest thing that I physically ever had to do, and then maintain, like, keeping my composure because I couldn't. And that was when I went for sentencing to turn myself in. I held my daughter the whole day because they let me stay till the end of the day. When they called my name up front to go up front and be sentenced. I kissed my daughter, I kissed my mom, I kissed my daughter's mother, and handed my daughter over. They called the sentence, turned around, looked at them, they're all bawling. And then they handcuffed me to a bunch of other people. And there were some girls that were handcuffed on the other side. And there was one girl that looked like her heart was broken. She was looking at me, and she said, I'm so sorry. She said, I wondered why your family was crying. And then I heard them read the sentence, and she was like, I'm so sorry. And I was just like, I couldn't hold it anymore. I was behind. I was like, bah! I got to my cell and bawled. And yeah, that was absolutely brutal.
Jobs came up in our conversation, and we discussed how difficult it can be for a convicted felon to find work. Our guest shared this story that I absolutely loved, and I just had to include it.
I know a lot of people in this state, and it's easier for me to get a job and have a career because I have a lot of people that they don't care about that. But in other states, like, I moved to Texas and I got turned down for so many jobs because of my felony. So I learned how to do leather work in prison. Purses, bags, backpacks, watches, whatever. I can do belts, whatever. Well, I was in Dallas, Texas. I couldn't find anything, and I walked past this store, and it said Leather Masters, but the windows were kind of blacked out. It was on a Sunday. It was not open, and it said they needed help. I was like, shit, maybe I can. I've never done saddles or boots, but I can get by. I can run a sewing machine. I know how to read patterns and cut leather. So I emailed them, and they were like, yes, we're looking for help. Please come in Monday for an interview. Well, it was open on Monday, and I went with the girl that I was dating, and it turns out it was a predominantly gay leather fetish store. And I walk in, and the guy behind the counter has got short leather shorts on with a Prince Albert piercing hanging out of the bottom of them. He's got Doc Martens up to his knees. He's got a big bull ring in his nose and big gauges in his ears. And he said, no shirt, zero shirt. And he said, welcome to Leather Masters. How can I help you? And I was like, I had to do like a little factory reset. And I was like, well, I'm here for a job interview. I went and met with the owners that were a gay married couple. I filled out the paperwork and they took me in the back. That's where I was going to be in manufacturing. And they gave me a pretty simple pattern and I made it. It wasn't a big deal at all. And they're like, yeah, you can sew and we know, you know what you're doing. And I'm like, let's go talk in the office. I was like, okay. And they said, look, so I didn't know that Dallas, Texas every year had a thing. I don't know if they still do or not, but it's called the Fetish Ball. And people from all over the world come to this thing. So when it gets close to the fetish ball, like your ass is making a lot of weird stuff, a lot of weird stuff. I just thought I knew a lot about that stuff. I did not. They said, look, we don't know if you're gay or not. We don't care, but there's a lot of gay men that come in here to buy leather gear. And there's no other place around here that sells it. Are you okay with that? I said, I'm not gay, but I don't care. And they said, you're attractive now. You're going to get hit on. And I was like, thanks, but I'm good. I'm fine. And it was accurate. It was very accurate. As the popular guy at the gay leather fetish store. I was talking to a very good friend of mine the other day, and they didn't realize there wasn't air conditioning in prison. And I can remember saying, I really don't care how hot it gets during the day. I'm just grateful for my air conditioning. I try to find something grateful for every day. But they said, what do you mean? Thankful for your air conditioning? I said, well, I spent 19 summers without air conditioning. And they were like, what? I said, yeah, there's no air conditioning in Alabama prison. And they were absolutely dumbfounded. Couldn't believe it.
Like in the entirety of the building?
No, I mean, in the admin were the wardens and the officers. Yeah. There's only one prison that I know of in Alabama that has air conditioning in it, and that's for the aged and infirmed. Once they're old and dying, they'll send them up there, and there's air conditioning there. But everywhere else, mm-mm.
You've said that you go and visit your friends sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you ever get PTSD seeing the building, smelling the building?
Now, the first time I went and I picked up somebody from prison, I was so excited to go back in because I knew I was going to get to come out. And it was so crazy because I'm pretty strong-willed and I'm pretty calm and level-headed. And I knew the officers that were working the front. They're like, how's it going, man? You look great, yada, yada, yada. And I started trembling and shaking and sweating profusely. And I couldn't control it. And I'm trying to have a conversation, my lips jerking and quivering, and my hands are trembling, and I'm pouring sweat, and I couldn't control it.
Just so anxious.
Yeah, and then I got him out of there, and we left. But since then, I went and I saw my friend Nick and Jimbo. They're both great men, and I didn't have any anxiety or anything. But when I got to the parking lot, I did get emotional because I hate them having to be there and leaving them there, and I know that it's a great feeling being able to walk out of there, but it's a shitty feeling having to leave, people that are going to do good when they get out. Both of those guys could move into my house tomorrow and I would have zero problems whatsoever. They're great people.
How long do they have left?
One might not ever get out. He's got a life sentence. He's got parole possibility, but they're not letting people out on parole. They just don't. And then one has done 23 years on a 35-year sentence, 24 years maybe. So he'll get out. I mean, he'll definitely get out in 12 years, but unless they parole him, he's there until then.
The first time we talked, you told me about Kenny Loggins and Louis Manjoni. I Googled those names because I was very curious. So Louis Manjoni, he was 17 when everything happened. So he originally got sentenced to death, but then Alabama passed a law that you can't put a minor to death. So his got changed to life without. But then I just saw he was denied for parole. So, can they change that and be like, okay, yeah, I guess you can apply, but, not give it to you? Because, yeah, he definitely applied for parole in, July and got declined, but...
Well, you don't apply. So what probably happened is if he got his case knocked down to that, he probably got a really good attorney and they found some kind of something in his case to where he got a resentencing, to where they're like, okay, we'll do away with this we'll give you the option of parole if you take this. And that's probably what happened. Because yeah, he'd had life without. I didn't know he had life. So that's two huge different sentences: life with parole or life without. So if he's eligible for parole, he's definitely had some sort of legal relief for sure. I don't know about any of the rest of them. Haven't really tried to keep up with him. Oh man, I honestly, it shocked me about Louis. He was such a good kid, man, and I don't know how he got caught up in that crap, man. He really was. He just, I don't know, that whole frontal cortex thing not being developed. It's really a thing, you know. It doesn't really finish till like 24, 25. I guess as humans, we're kind of built that way for certain reasons, but damn, people just don't have, like, at that age, you don't even realize your own mortality, much less anybody else's. You don't give a shit about anything.
Did you ever know anyone who had the death penalty and it went through?
No. No, and you're not ever around those people. They're in a completely segregated, different type of facility. Yeah, they keep them in a completely separate part of prisons. There's only like 3 prisons at the time: West Jefferson, St. Clair, and Holman. That's where they had the death penalty. I think they execute most of the people at Holman, if I'm not mistaken.
Do you agree with the death penalty?
I don't. And it's not that I don't think maybe somebody deserves it, but I think it's a huge waste of money. I've read that way more cost effective to keep somebody incarcerated than it is to kill them, from what I hear. I don't know, but I'm a little bit torn, because I have met some people in prison that scare the absolute shit out of me and never ever need to have the remote possibility of stepping outside of those walls again. Like, there are some sociopaths in there that are dangerous people, and they will kill you in a blink of an eye and not think twice about it. When you meet one of those people, you never forget them. Your skin tingles, your spidey senses goes off. They are a true sociopath, and they don't care anything about you or anybody else. I remember nobody knew this guy, and I knew him, and he was a killer. He came into prison when he was 16 years old, and he ended up stabbing a guy. The guy was trying to press him for sex, and he's one of the biggest bodybuilder guys in the prison. He caught him sitting down on the TV, and he got a lawnmower blade, turned it into a knife, and he stabbed the dude in the chest and turned him into an invalid. He was a killer. A real killer. He transferred to the prison I was at, and he didn't know him. They didn't know him, but somebody went right up under his bed and got his shower slides, and they stole them. And he came back from chow and looked, and he didn't say anything to anybody. He went and got a knife, and he just started walking around dorm to dorm, looking for whoever got his shoes. And by the time he had made it back to his bunk, his shoes were back up under the bed. Because he would have killed somebody over that, like, no doubt. Not even think twice about it. If it's going to be like that, back in the day, you had a thing that was called what was it called? It wasn't a blood oath. Maybe it was a blood feud, something like that. But let's just say, being ridiculous, there's no doubt whatsoever that I killed you. Someone in your family, like your husband, he had the duty or the option to kill me. I think that is a better option than, having the state do it. If somebody's wrongs you to that point and you feel like that's the only way that it can be rectified, is that your vengeance? But then if you want to get into a religious debate, that's not your job. But I'm going to be honest, if someone harmed my kid the wrong way, I might lose my mind. Who knows? But that's anybody.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Life After Aryan. A big thank you to our guest for again sharing his powerful story and insights with us today. It takes a lot of courage to open up about such personal experiences. From the feedback we've received, it's clear that our listeners really like him, and I can see why. I hope this conversation resonated with you as much as it did with me. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and share it with others. You can also follow me at Madelayne Klein on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. Your support helps us continue these important discussions. Join us next time as we explore more stories of resilience and transformation. Until then, take care, and you'll be hearing from me sooner rather than later.